When using a chatterbait fishing lure for bass in spring, just chunking and winding it back will often catch a few fish. Because the weather and water changes so quickly, though, there are three retrieves that I've found are best: feathering, floating, and plowing, and the best one varies daily. In this video, I share my chatterbait secrets over 3 days, adjusting as conditions go from prefrontal to rainy to cold front, and show how to use chatterbaits for bass fishing.
Well, I'll turn it off. I hit it the first time. I didn't think I had a fish. I thought it was just grass. I missed a couple other ones in the old swimming worm. And I'm like, I think I'm just feeling stuff. And then bang.
So you see this first one, I'm just kind of chunking and winding it. They're active. It's before the front's coming, and I don't have to do anything. You just cast it out there. That's what I call cruising or just chunking and winding. And one jumps on it. And you'll catch some fish doing that, but that's not that consistent. And you see it's not a great big one. It's just an active dummy that you'll catch just chunking and winding.
Feels pretty good when you're just full of grass. Look to the old red or the orange power stinger. As soon as I did, got a fish.
So let's get into the first technique that I call feathering, and I think this is probably the best one when you're fishing around shallow grass. And there's grass a few feet underneath the surface. I'm reeling along fairly fast, but letting it get down the grass and then popping it up out. So kind of feathering it, not letting it bog down, but feathering it over the top. As soon as you feel the grass, you give a little pop. Not a super sharp one, but you kind of either reel it up fast or just pop your rod a little bit. Always staying in contact with the grass, trying to be ticking the tops of it. And that's typically better ones are going to get triggered when you pop it.
SlobberKnocker. And that orange, I don't know, in this muddy water, that orange power stinger, that's been a Texas special forever. And this green pumpkin and white, I don't know, that's the go-to.
An active one, they're starting to get active here, so some of them just jump on it, but it seems like the active ones are the dinks. And see here, I keep on hitting the grass, and one hits at it, pop it out, and then you pop it a couple times, he's following it, obviously you hit at it, popping at some grass, and then finally hook up with him. Watch this one again. I'm getting in contact with the grass when I pop it, and I'll keep reeling, give it a quick pop, and then bites. You'll notice so many of them on day one here, that feathering, it's right after a pop is when they hit it. So it touches the grass. I kind of hop, shoot it out of the grass just a little bit. It falls back down. As it falls, tick, you feel them hit it. So you see I'm starting to get a rhythm now. I kind of got it dialed in an area that has a lot, and it's biting type of day. That's where you get that retrieve going, and now it just feels like once you get that dialed in, you feel like it's just a matter of time until you get a good one, and you sift through the small and medium sized ones, and sooner or later the big one's going to crumb. The retrieve, that popping, that feathering really triggers bigger fish to bite. And it's something that once you get it going, you can really load up on them. Now I'll let the camera roll a little longer on this one. This really drives home the point. You see that I miss one here. I'm popping it and feathering it over the top of the grass, and then kind of, if you hang up a little bit, you have to give it a sharper snap. But usually it's that little pop. Well, then sure enough, you know there's one in the area. Take a good note of it. I actually dropped a waypoint there, and then fire right back in, and you can see the whole sequence of if I let it, when I hit the waypoint, how it bogged down the grass. That's not what you want them tangled up a bit here. You want to keep it so it's just touching the top of that grass. Like I said, I'm in 4 or 5 feet, the grass is a couple feet down, so I go back in there, I reel it a bit, feel the grass on it, just give it a little raise. Just pull it up a little bit, reel it till I feel the grass, make contact, I'll slow down and make sure I'm feeling it. You always want to be contacting, kind of give it a small pull. It's not aggressive, and then boom, it's that stop and go, pulling out of the grass that gets them to eat it. I lose a little one here, and you notice the first thing I do, like I said before, is drop that waypoint. And out in the grass fields, you kind of get like a little map going there where there's an area that has fish in it, and they're holding, and there'll be sometimes the size of a living room, sometimes the size of a football field. There's, you know, a smaller big area, but you kind of, if you miss one like that, it's usually not a loner. There's a few fish in that area, and you want to throw exactly right back through there, and sooner or later, it's a lot of times just a little miss, or you lose one, and you throw back in, there'll be a great big one.
Okay, I'm getting a lot of little ones. Muddy up here. Look how fat pre-spawn that one is. Tons of bucks. It's like 2 days before the full moon. Been a huge warming trend, and now it's a little cooler, but you know, still the water temp's like 60 degrees here, up here. Had been in the 40s. Full moon's coming. Big ones are coming.
Well, I kind of ended up calling my shot here. You know, a big one's about to come, and actually saw this one at live scope. It's the only time I use it to help locate the grass, make sure I'm around grass. But saw some taller grass, and I see a dot out there by it, and actually instead of just feathering it, I let it drop down by that one, almost like a jig. And sure enough, that big old fish, he hammered it once it got by him. That's live scope. You get a lot of bonus fish like that you wouldn't normally catch.
Pretty good one, the old SlobberKnocker. Pre-spawn female. So what do we have going on here? You can see over my shoulder we have, it's a big spawning flat, right? It's all 2-3 feet. You have flooded bushes on the shore, a bunch of hay grass, and then there's hydrilla and coontail out in the middle here. Been cold, you know, it's warming up, and the fish, there's full moon in a few days. That's typically, it's a big wave of spawners around there. The water's right around 60. Had been in the 40s, so the fish are coming, right? So they're coming shallow to spawn. Where I'm finding the fish, the bucks, is every time I get up towards all that shallow cover, they're gonna spawn there in a few days. Every time I get out in the ditch, you can't see it out here, you know, you can't visually see it, but that's where the thicker grass is at. That's where the deeper water is, like 7-8 feet out there. And every time I throw in the ditches, that's where I catch a better fish. So very classic pre-spawn pattern. Go get on these flats, you look for the biggest spawning flats you can find, and then the immediately close deep water, especially if there's grass, you know, hydrilla, milfoil, coontail, that's where the big ones are going to be staging until they move up onto the flats and spawn, and then they'll drop back there as well. Anytime there's a cold front, they move right out here, or they pull off to these little points. Then for me, this is a pretty classic pre-spawn bait anytime you have grass. This is Berkley SlobberKnocker. I have a 4-inch power stinger on the back and then bright orange. Why am I using orange? Because it's muddy water. It's overcast today, so it doesn't look like brown. I promise you, your bait disappears. I get out there a little bit farther, it's like 3 to 6 inches down. It disappears in here about a foot down. So it's got plenty of stain to it, and that orange stands out. The green pumpkin and white, that to me, that's just a natural shad color. That works everywhere. If it was in clear water, I would go with more of a, you know, kind of a white, a shad type trailer. But when I get around mud, I go to the sun perch or bluegill looking one, that yellow, or excuse me, the orange on the back there. That's just a classic pre-spawn mud bait for me. And then the other thing is the SlobberKnocker. I'm using the heavy one. I'm using a 1/2 ounce. A lot of these fish, when it's sunny, they get up on top of the grass. They kind of sun, they sit high in the water. When it's overcast like this and colder, they like to sit lower. So I let it go out to the bottom, kind of sink down, slow roll it through there. This is actually a Revo SX. This is a slower retrieve ratio. It's like a 5 or a 6 to 1. So I'm slow rolling it through the grass there, even though it looks like I'm winding it fast. And that kind of just pops those, pops out of the grass right in the face of those big ones. Wham, they eat it.
Now this is a good example of what I was just talking about. It looks like I'm reeling fairly fast, but it's a slower retrieve reel. I'm switching back and forth between a few of them. I like that slower one where I'm trying to force myself to slow down a little bit more. And sure enough, with that slow, just barely ticking the top of the grass is what, as it gets a little tougher in the afternoon, that helps trigger a few more bites.
Lunchtime. Up my lunch game just a little bit. You know, it has been so cold that basically you could just take any sandwich or anything, throw it in your storage locker, and be good all day. But I picked up, how much Hack-A-Box from Plano. They make coolers. Obviously, they know a little bit about plastic storage, so figure what the heck. We got some premium pure water from 7 Select, 7-Eleven, because nothing more pure than pure water, as opposed to the non-pure water. Then we got some Pride of Wisconsin Country Fresh Meats. Yeah. From Weston, Wisconsin. So anything Wisconsin know is they know cheese, and they got a lot of dairy up there, so it might be a dairy cow instead of Angus, but cheese would be good. So the fish are eating a little bit. Crazy stuff today. Man, I found these at the gas station, the Utz, the rippled fried dill pickle. Now, if this was a lure, I'd definitely bite it. It's pretty good.
Now, since they were actively biting, I tried to find some other areas, and I fished a ton of water and didn't really find them again. I finally found one area in the evening where they're chasing shad some, and you see I'm reeling fairly fast and fairly straight instead of feathering it. There's less grass, but here again, even though it's like out in the middle of nowhere, popping it and stopping is when they eat it. So the rain comes on day 2, as you can see, and it'll end up pouring, but you notice my rod tip's pointed down a lot more. I'm still feathering some and popping it like that, but this is more of a plow, the retrieve number 2, and when they're buried up more in the grass, you hold the rod tip down, you let the bait go to the bottom, and you just plow right through the grass clumps. It's one of those that pops out kind of right in their nose, and they either have to run from it or eat it. And you notice, like I said, I still pop the rod some when I have the grass to try to clear it. But when I was feathering yesterday, I'll pop it, then my rod tip stays kind of level or up. With this, when I'm plowing it, I'll pop it up, but then I put my rod tip straight back down again. I want that down, making either bottom contact or really plowing through the base of those clumps. And when they're not chasing as much, and there's fish in the area, you can literally make them bite by plowing it. And any other retrieve, I mean, you're not going to get a bite. You'll think they're not even there. Now, sometimes when they're on that plow retrieve and they're more on the bottom, I pick up the swim jig, and a swim jig like a 3/8 one. And if you slow reel it, you can actually crawl it through the grass better and get down on the bottom. If they're making beds out in the grass or sitting lower, it works better sometimes. And they're just off the chatterbait, the bladed jig. They'll bite that better and get a pretty good one here on it. But then it's really not the deal. I was hoping sometimes though it can be the totally unlock the puzzle when they're on that plow retrieve.
A little better one. Switched up right there. Throwing the old blade jig, the old SlobberKnocker, and be whacking at it, missing it. But put on a swim jig. It's a 3/8 ounce. It's got that sun gill on there. Little power swimmer, and just slow rolling that. The bladed jig, it does a great job going over the top of the grass. Sometimes when they start to spawn, they bury up down in it. That's what a swim jig, you slow roll it. It kind of, if there's a weed clump, it kind of crawls over it and just falls down into that gap where a spawn bed is, right next to the clump of weeds. And sure enough.
So it's starting to really pour now, and you hear some wind blowing and stuff. And sometimes that's really good in the spring. If you get a warm rain, that warm rain will warm up the water, make them really go crazy. It just was not warm enough, needed more sun, and they weren't going that good. So they're kind of random. I'm not catching them as good. I'm having to plow for them, and still catching fish, but just not the big ones. No, I didn't even put it in here, but there were a lot where I just covered a lot of water. When it's raining like that, a lot of times if you just plow and put it in front of one, there's some fish that are going to be randomly aggressive. I did catch that, but they weren't great big ones, and it was just a random one here, one there. It works when it's raining, but it's not a real consistent pattern overall. So later in the day, it's going to get kind of colder, and it's just not warming up. So I went up to the isolated reed clumps, and where there's just scattered grass, they wanted to move up to those, and having to make bomb cast out there and just slow crawl it along the bottom, and you could eventually pop into one. Like that plow, a lot of times, like I said, when they're negative, they're not feeding, just plowing it along, put it in their face, and make them bite them sooner or later. I'm really slow grinding out there. A lot of times making these really long casts, trying to keep it away from the boat, and just slow reeling it, plowing it along to the grass, give a little pop to try to trigger one. And then you'd feel a swat, one would just swat at it but not get it. Every once in a while you hooked up, and I said it's almost always after that little pop, but you have to plow a long time in between plops or the pops versus yesterday when they're more active. I'm popping it pretty regularly. These rainy kind of grinder days, there's not much fishing pressure on them. It's kind of low light. I felt like the lake really owed me a good one that day. And this a lot of times where I catch big bags or isolated big fish. Can't even keep them hooked today, though. It's just not quite going, and the rain just kept on coming. I got the rod tip down, just plowing along, but I stayed out there just because, like I said, those are the days that if you just put it in front of them, it just seemed like it was kind of a little bit unlucky day for me there. But it really felt like sooner or later I was going to get a big one. I had it dialed with the right presentation.
That was literally going to be my last cast, cold and wet. Not going to make another cast.
So now on the third day, the rain's over. The clouds are going to clear pretty quickly here. The water's come up. It's rained a lot. It rained overnight, so I'm looking for fresh cover now. A lot of times they'll move up with it and get up in the shallow cover. I hit pay dirt right away with one. But then I flipped around quite a bit, and I was hoping that newly flooded cover, they would be up there, but they really weren't. And it's just not warm enough. Now, once the sun comes out, that seems to, if it warms the water temperature, I found a protected pocket where the sun was beating down, it was warming up a little bit. I could see a little bit of shad activity and did catch one, a decent one flipping, and got a couple other bites, lost another one and stuff. But it just, there again, it was going to take a couple more days of sunshine to really get them up there and active. So the one thing the sun does do, though, and I switched up, and it brings me to the third retrieve, it gets them high in the water column. They're close to the surface. They're sitting at the top of the grass or above it. So it's almost like that jig head minnow where you want to keep the fish up above them. And I call this floating. I go to a lighter bladed jig, a 3/8 ounce, still slow rolling it because they're not really chasing, but you want that lighter one and you want to keep it up above them. So I want to tick the grass every once in a while, but I don't really want to bog down in it. I want to keep it fairly high. And sure enough, the big ones are up sunning around a little bit deeper water. And I start off with a pretty good one, doing the old floating technique. Like I said, with that lighter bladed jig going 3/8 instead of that half of yesterday, reeling it slow and still hitting the grass every once in a while, kind of feathering, but you just to make sure you're within range. But I want it up above it, and another little ditch going into a tiny bay. And sure enough, another pretty good one. All that rain and you have the sun out, boy, that's in that muddier water and it's bright out. I really like the reds and orange. I'm using the fire craw on this one here, the SlobberKnocker. It's that red and orange. It really stands out well. And it seems like when it's sunny and muddy, man, orange and red just really get good, especially orange. Now, as the sun kept on beating down, instead of fishing those ditches, I kept on working my way back into the flooded stuff, hoping they would kind of warm up because the water temperature was coming up, and hoping it would pull them up there. Did find some fish up in the shallows.
That water's so muddy. That fish disappears like right under the surface. Look at that. We just got out of that super muddy water to where it's just, you can actually see your bait like 3 inches down, right on the edge.
I did have to get on the road, which was unfortunate this day. It seemed like the sun was beating down. I kept on trying that shallow, like I said, and wasted a lot of time on that. It seemed like it was a couple days away from that sun beating down, really getting good. The little bit deeper grass, uh, that definitely had them a lot better. And still had to do the plow or the float. They weren't really feathering and chasing like they were. But give it 1 or 2 days and that water coming up, you knew it was going to get good. So I hated to leave, but had a pretty good 3 days adjusting with the conditions, changed up the retrieve, and it seems between the three of those, instead of just chunking and winding, you're going to catch them a whole lot better.